Welcome to Does It Matter by Brainy Ballers, where we dissect the game with cutting-edge analytics to give you the upper hand. We analyze everything from hand sizes to average depth of targets to uncover hidden trends that no one else sees. Say goodbye to guesswork and hello to data-driven domination. Because here at Brainy Ballers, we don't just watch the game, we understand it. So get ready, it's podcast time.
Okay, so for years, right, there's this idea floating around NFL circles, almost like a common knowledge.
You mean about quarterback hand size?
Exactly, hand size. The belief is pretty simple. Bigger hands mean better grip.
Fewer fumbles, maybe more control when the weather gets nasty.
Yeah, maybe even, more zip on the ball. But it's mostly been just anecdotes, scout talk.
Combine measurements that get talked about a lot.
Right. So our mission here for this deep dive was to kind of push past that.
Yeah, we wanted to really look at the data rigorously, see if there's an actual, statistically significant link.
A link between hand size and, let's say, enduring elite performance in the league.
And we found some really interesting source material to work with, a big data analysis focused on top fantasy football finishers.
Okay, fantasy points is the metric.
Exactly. The data set looked at the top 30 fantasy QBs each season, going all the way back to 2003.
Wow, that's a good chunk of time.
It is. And one key thing, we specifically excluded rookies. Their first year or two, performance can be up and down. It doesn't always reflect that sustained high-level play we were interested in.
Gotcha. So fantasy performance is standing in here as a proxy for that consistent, impactful on-field production.
It's a pretty good measure of who's really delivering year after year at a high level.
Okay, so what did the data start to show?
What was really interesting was when we zeroed in on the truly elite guys, the top 5 fantasy finishers each season.
The absolute top tier.
Right. And we did see a clear trend there. Quarterbacks in that group, they consistently had hand sizes falling between 9.5 and 9 7/8 inches.
Right, so 9.5 to just under 10 inches. That seems like a reliable zone.
Yeah, it looks like that range provides a solid foundation for grip, control, accuracy.
But that wasn't the whole story, was it? You mentioned a kind of aha.
Right, that range was strong, definitely. The thing that really jumped out was a different cluster.
Do you want to start dominating your drafts? At BrainyBallers.com, we've researched every metric under the sun for you to find which ones are best linked to fantasy points. You can access hundreds of metrics to sharpen your scouting ability so you know which metrics matter and which are just noise. Stop guessing on which thresholds to look for within each metric. Big numbers can be misleading or irrelevant. Our Ultimate Athlete Blueprints reveal essential scouting metrics, their importance and benchmarks within each metric that help predict a player's probability of being a success or bust. Elevate your scouting ability with Brainy Ballers' Ultimate Athlete Blueprints today. Click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
We saw a significant spike in elite performance for quarterbacks with hands in a slightly larger, very specific range, 10.125 to 10.375 inches.
Whoa, okay, so a very specific, slightly larger window, 10 1/8 to 10 3/8.
Exactly, a pretty narrow range, but it correlated really strongly with being in that absolute top tier of performers.
Do we have numbers on that? How strong was the correlation?
We do. Get this, 36% of all the top 5 quarterback seasons in the entire data set, their hands were in that specific 10.125 to 10.375 inch range.
36%. Okay, how does that compare to, everyone else?
Well, compare that to just 21.3% of all the other QBs in the data set falling into that same range.
Wow, okay, 36 versus 21. That's a pretty noticeable difference, statistically speaking.
It really is. It suggests that hitting that specific size threshold might give you some tangible advantages that really matter at the very highest level.
Like, what kind of advantages are we thinking?
Well, potentially things like enhanced torque on throws, maybe superior ball security in the pocket.
Better grip and velocity, especially when conditions are bad.
Exactly. All critical factors when you're talking about elite, consistent play.
Okay, but the analysis also looked at the bigger picture, right? Like, across everyone. Didn't it run a Pearson correlation test?
It did, yeah. We looked for that simple, broad, linear relationship between hand size and fantasy performance across the entire data set.
And what did that show? Was it just bigger is better straight across?
Actually, no. The Pearson value was really low, 0.076.
0.076. And for context, what does that mean? Is that significant?
Not really, no. Typically, you'd want to see a value over zero point 0.1 or maybe below negative zero point 0.1 to say there's a significant linear correlation.
So pretty weak overall linear link.
Very weak. Just for comparison, something like, say, running back draft capital that has a stronger negative correlation with fantasy points, around negative 0.234. Still not huge, but stronger than hand size overall.
Okay, so the low Pearson score. Does that mean hand size doesn't matter after all, despite the spike you found in the elite group?
And that is the absolute key takeaway here, the nuance. A low Pearson value just means there isn't one simple straight line relationship that applies equally to everyone. It absolutely does not mean that specific thresholds or ranges don't matter.
Especially at the extremes, like for the top performers?
Precisely. It highlights why you have to dig deeper sometimes. The overall number can mask what's happening within specific critical segments of the data, like that elite tier we talked about.
So boiling it down then, you can't just look at hand size alone across the board and say bigger is definitively better. The overall correlation is too weak for that simple conclusion.
Correct. That's too simplistic based on this data.
The analysis does strongly suggest that if you're aiming for truly elite status, falling into that very specific 10 1/8 to 10 3/8 inch range seems to offer a distinct, measurable advantage.
Yes. It appears to matter, but context and hitting that specific sweet spot range are key. It's not something you'd use as a standalone metric, but within that narrow band, there's a signal.
Okay, so the main takeaway for you listening: hand size isn't everything. Forget a simple bigger is always better rule based on this data.
Definitely not across the board. That low overall correlation shows that.
But for the guys performing at the very, very top, the elite fantasy finishers, the data does suggest being in that specific 10.125 to 10.375 inch range confers a genuine statistical edge.
It appears to, yeah. A noticeable advantage shows up there.
Which really makes you think, doesn't it? How this kind of data might challenge some of the conventional wisdom out there.
For sure.
And maybe what it tells us about needing to look beyond just the simple, easy measurements to find those more nuanced factors, those specific thresholds that truly contribute to elite performance, something to chew on.